So this is Love, a Twisted Tales series. What if Cinderella never tried on the glass slipper? Chapter 20. The next morning, Cinderella couldn't stop thinking about her conversation with Lenore. But, of course, duty called, and she knew the seamstresses would be busy preparing for the night's masquerade, so she shuttled Duchess Genevieve's gown to Louisa for last-minute alterations at an early hour. When she entered the workroom, she stifled a gasp. There were fabrics strewn across the floor, mannequins half dressed, and ribbons tangled in knots, spiraling from their spindles. In the thick of it was Louisa, so harried she barely noticed Cinderella's presence. "Where is everyone?" Cinderella asked. "You mean the other seamstresses?" Thread dangled from Louisa's mouth, and her fingers were covered in thimbles. "They're at fittings. Is that from the Duchess?" "She needs the collar repaired." Cinderella passed her the gown. "Why are you the only one here?" "I have to stay. All the lords need their uniforms pressed, and the ladies need their gowns hemmed and bodices cinched." Bodices. It goes on and on. Louisa rubbed her eyes with the back of her hand. "I'm the most junior, so I'm stuck with the cleaning and the mending. At this rate, I'll need 8 pairs of hands to finish before the ball." Cinderella glanced at their array of lavish finery. Some of the dresses flaunted the high empire waist that had been the fashion during the earlier part of King George's reign, but a good majority of the gowns sported natural waist and puffed sleeves with chokers and headbands to match. The style looked familiar. "I see you've discovered the mysterious princess effect," said Louisa dryly. Cinderella spun to face her friend. "What?" "Seems the girl with the glass slipper has set off a new trend." Heat rose to Cinderella's cheeks. "You mean they're trying to dress like her?" "Yes, but I don't think it'll help the prince notice any of them." Louisa rolled her eyes. "Not when he's so hopelessly in love." The sarcasm in her tone made Cinderella blink. "Then why bother?" "Why not?" Louisa shrugged. "They're rich, so what's another ball gown to them? A lottery ticket, a chance to win the prince's heart. I almost can't blame them. Can it even be love if they've only met once? That stuff made of fairy tales, and they live happily ever after." Batting her eyelashes, Louisa fanned herself with the sleeve she was working on, then pretended to faint in her chair. She bounced up. "Real life doesn't happen that way. In real life, you learn that the Prince Charles gets terrible onion breath after dinner every night, that he has hairy warts all over his back, or that he dislikes dogs." "I hope he doesn't dislike dogs," said Cinderella, not knowing whether to smile or frown. "Aren't you the romantic?" Louisa laughed. She stabbed her needle into the pincushion and began folding the garment she had just finished. "Fine, maybe not. But I don't believe in love at first sight, do you?" "I think it happens. The king probably agrees with you. The seamstresses have a bet going on that the real point of this whole new rigmarole is finding the prince another bride." Cinderella picked up a puddle of pink satin, fixing her stare a little too hard on its soft folds. "Doesn't everyone think that?" Louisa shrugged. "Who can keep up with these royals? I certainly can't. Last night I didn't arrive home until well after midnight, and even then I was up helping my mother sew until dawn." She picked up one of her bandaged fingers. "She's been flooded with dress requests for the masquerade." "I could help," suggested Cinderella, picking up a pair of light blue trousers from one of the baskets. "Don't you have to assist the Duchess?" "It's early. She's still asleep for now." "All right, then take care of these." Louisa practically tossed a pair of trousers at her. "It's an urgent order. I'll work on the Duchess's collar." Cinderella claimed one of the 3-legged stools in the corner and laid the pants on her lap. There was a note pinned to one of the legs that the left pocket needed to be mended. That would be easy enough. Cinderella reached for a needle and a spool of thread in a matching blue. As she tugged at the trouser pockets, a few handkerchiefs and an empty snuff box fell out. Cinderella carefully put them aside and resumed her work, only to find that there were yet more hidden pockets in the trousers. One held an empty vial. "Whose are these?" she asked, turning them inside out. "I don't know. They don't usually tell us who the garments belong to, unless it's a member of the royal family. Such pockets are commonplace enough." Louisa grinned slyly. "Nobles need all sorts of hiding places for their fans and secret love letters." "Secret love letters? You're joking, aren't you?" Louisa laughed. What do you think the nobles do all day? They don't have to toil for their wages like we do. The king works, Cinderella reasoned, and so does the Grand Duke, if you call spying and scheming work. True, but the rest of them busy themselves with balls and gossip. Louisa sighed, staring longingly at the Duchess's gown. And beautiful, beautiful dresses. A strand of pearls had fallen off the trimming on one of the sleeves, and Louisa stroked her chin, studying how she should begin her work. The lace on this alone cost a fortnight's salary. Can you imagine owning a gown so beautiful? She took the sleeves and tucked the dress under her chin, letting the skirt fall over her legs with a swoosh. Cinderella did the same, holding up the trousers and pretending to be a young lord. Miss Louisa, would you do me the honor of a dance? She bowed with a flourish and Louisa curtsied. Then the two girls danced to an imaginary waltz. You know, you look a little like her. Cinderella tilted her head. The runaway princess. Has anyone told you that? A couple of the girls from Blooms and Looms had mentioned it. Cinderella's mouth went instantly dry. Her throat constricted. Could she trust Louisa with the truth? Well, Thankfully, at that instant, the door burst open and the two girls immediately rushed to the nearest chairs. In stormed Madame Ermina, heaping another basket of clothes by the ones already next to Louisa. I see I was wrong about you, Ermina said, frowning at Cinderella. I reward you with a permanent position in the palace, and the first thing you do is stir up mischief with my niece. Disappointment always bounds when it comes to these new young hires. No, no, Madame Ermina, said Cinderella. I was just dropping off Her Highness's gown. Then she was helping me with some of the mending, truly, Aunt Ermina. I hope so, Ermina replied, still frowning. You girls better get back to work. There's a ball tonight, and both your jobs are on the line. When she left, Louisa erupted into laughter. That was close. Did you see how cross she looked? Louisa pretended to fan herself. I think she isn't happy unless she threatens at least one person's job a day. Old Aunt Spoilsport. Cinderella smiled. She's not so bad. Compared to my stepmother, your aunt's as gentle as a mouse. At the memory, Cinderella's amusement faded. She lowered her gaze so Louisa wouldn't ask about her past and resumed work on the urgent trousers. Now that the pockets had been emptied, Cinderella quickly checked the material, especially the white stripes on the pant legs, for stains. As she finally began to sew, something rustled against her ankle. What's this? She murmured to herself, removing several scraps of paper from yet another one of the hidden pockets. The papers had gone through the wash, smearing the ink, and while the writing was small and neat, it was barely legible. Cinderella glanced at the scraps to make sure they weren't anything important, but the only words she could vaguely make out were concoction and pain. Not knowing what to do with them, she crumpled them into her pocket to throw away later. Louisa tilted her head at her. You know, everyone says the Duchess is a terrible mistress, but you don't seem to be that afraid of her. I'm not, Cinderella admitted. I've seen real cruelty, and the Duchess is not even close. She can be difficult, but her heart is in the right place. Besides, she likes Bruno, and since adopting him, she's been kind to me. Maybe, but I think there's more to it than Bruno, determined Louisa. You just seem so cheerful, Cinderella. Cheerful yet sad. I don't know how to explain it, but I bet people find it difficult being angry with you. I wonder if that's why the Duchess likes you so much. Even Aunt Ermina does, even if she won't admit it. I find that hard to believe, said Cinderella dryly. The trousers were finished and she held them up, checking her handiwork. She had reason to be proud, and she moved on to the next garment. A rack of coats stood by one of the windows, and Cinderella wondered whether any of them might be the prince's. What was he doing now, she wondered, preparing for the ball and a new bride. You mentioned that most of the nobles busy themselves with gossip and balls, she said, in as casual a tone as she could muster. Is the prince like them? Prince Charles? Oh, no, he's nothing like that. What do you know about him? Louisa dipped her needle into the sleeve she was working on, then tied a finishing knot. Not much. He's been away at the Royal University for years. All I know is he wasn't happy about the ball. Why not? It's all rumors, of course, but the king threw the ball the night the prince returned and invited every eligible maiden to attend. The prince didn't have an inkling that it was happening until the night of, and everyone said he yawned during the introductions. I wouldn't blame him. He must have been so tired from his journey home. A couple of the girls slipped out for half an hour to watch. They think he was about to leave entirely until he met the runaway princess. Cinderella wished everyone stopped calling her a princess. Did you see her? Only at a glance, Louisa laughed. My fingers were sore from all that sewing for the ball, so I left just as she arrived. I thought she was just a tardy noble. I could kick myself for missing all the fun. She gave Cinderella a sidelong glance. But I'm going to stay longer this time. What about what your aunt said? I'll be careful, and I'm the only one who's sneaking out. After 2 parties in quick succession, who knows when the next one will be? Louisa rifled through the basket Madame Ermina had left and fished out a dress. It wasn't as sumptuous as the gown with the pearl trimming she danced with earlier, but the color matched her hazel eyes. Look, the perfect gown just happened to land at my feet. It's beautiful, Cinderella breathed. Pressing the dress against herself, Louisa grinned. You heard my aunt. This basket's for next week. No one will miss it. She tilted her head thoughtfully. If I tuck in the bodice a little and add some lace to the sleeves, it'll be just right for the ball. Will you come with me? It'll be more fun if we go together. Oh, I couldn't. I can't risk it. I need this job. Cinderella trained her gaze on the sleeve she was repairing. I don't have an aunt who'll protect me if I get in trouble. Just for an hour, Louisa pleaded. Everyone's invited technically, even us. Madame Ermina can't fire us for that, no matter how much she wants to. She didn't fire the girls who slipped out last time. But how could she tell Louisa that she was the mysterious princess? A part of her did want to go to the ball, even if the prince didn't recognize her, just to spend time with her new friends. But a part of her also worried that her stepmother would be there. My stepmother, Cinderella finally admitted. You asked if I had a home to go back to. I don't, but I do have a family. She stared at her hands. My stepmother. She'll be looking for me. Sensing something was wrong, Louisa sat down her work and sat beside Cinderella. You sound afraid of her. She wasn't good to me, Cinderella swallowed, remembering. My papa was lucky in his work and made a small fortune as a merchant. When he first married my stepmother, he helped her pay off her first husband's debts. After he died, she took over the household, but she didn't have any interest in taking over his business. Instead, she squandered the money on jewels for herself and dresses for her daughters. Times were difficult, and she had to dismiss most of the help. Cinderella, we must all do our part, she told me. My daughters are delicate creatures, but seeing as you are so strong, you must help with the housework for now. For now became 10 years. Along with the housework, I did the sewing and the mending, the cleaning, the cooking. I even took care of the chickens and the cows. You were a servant for your family, said Louisa with a little gasp. It wasn't so bad, Cinderella began, but as soon as she said it, she realized that wasn't true. It had been terrible. She just tried not to acknowledge it. Not so bad, Louisa said. That sounds horrible. She scooted her stool closer to Cinderella's and lowered her voice. So you ran away? What made you finally decide enough was enough? Cinderella pursed her lips, an ache rising in her chest. The truth hurt. She wanted to sell me. Sell you? Louisa's eyes bulged. She hired a man to take me away from her rouleaus. Cinderella clutched her skirt, recalling the terrifying night and her harrowing escape. Someplace so far I wouldn't be able to come back. Horror etched itself on Louisa's face, and she squeezed Cinderella's arm. It's all right, Cinderella, said Cinderella, but her voice trembled as she spoke. That's how you found me on the road. I jumped out of the coach and tumbled onto the street. It was raining hard, and Bruno and I didn't have anywhere to go. You're safe now, promised Louisa. You won't ever have to go back. Cinderella nodded mutely and started to reach for another garment to sew, but Louisa kept her hand on her arm. I can't promise tonight's masquerade will erase what awful things your stepmother's done to you, but it will be a start. Don't let fear of my aunt be what's keeping you from going to the ball. She acts tough because it's her job, but she's soft at heart. Really? If she catches us at the ball, we might get extra chores, but it'll be worth it for a night to remember. She was young once, too, though it's hard to imagine. Cinderella chuckled. Was she a troublemaker like you? Mama says she was worse. How she ended up in charge of blooms and looms is a miracle. Louisa clasped her hands. If you see your stepmother at the ball, tell me, and we'll leave right away. Friends watch over each other. That made Cinderella smile. She couldn't remember the last time she had a true human friend. It had been years since she had someone her age she could talk to. It would be nice to go with Louisa. Cinderella pursed her lips, considering. And besides, while she was there, she could see what the Grand Duke was up to. Perhaps she could discover something useful for either the Duchess or her godmother. You know what? She said slowly. You're right. I will go. Louisa clapped her hands with delight. Do you want to meet me at sundown? Her spirits buoyed. Cinderella smiled at her friend. Yes. I'll come to your room, promised Louisa. I have the perfect dress in mind for you. Chapter 21. Dusk fell swiftly, and as the rumbling carriages arriving outside the ballroom pierced the palace's usual calm, reaching in even Cinderella's ears as she outfitted the Duchess in her royal accoutrements, she grew more and more anxious. You keep looking out the window, rebuked Genevieve. Are diamonds falling from the sky, or is there some other reason I am unworthy of your attention? Neither, your highness, Cinderella replied, chastened. With a frown, the Duchess examined the chignon Cinderella had arranged. It'll do. But good heavens, you certainly are distracted this evening. You've missed a button. Genevieve lifted her chin so Cinderella could refasten the back of her collar. You're jumpy as a catfish, girl, and you're not even the one being welcomed back to court. Unable to deny it, Cinderella bit her lip. What is it? Persisted the Duchess. Are you planning to sneak into the ball? Is it sneaking if all the eligible young ladies in the kingdom are invited? Genevieve arched an elegant eyebrow and bent to stroke Bruno's ears. That was the last ball, Cindergirl. This one is expressly by invitation only. That way, if any young lady decides to dash off, Charles will at least know her name. As if he understood the Duchess's barbed remark, Bruno sank deeper into his cushioned bed. Cinderella wished she could do the same. I was only going to go for an hour with a friend. No more. Genevieve held up her fan, silencing Cinderella. I do not want to be an accomplice in your illicit outgoing. I'm sure Madame Ermina has given you girls her fair warning about sneaking out to the ball. She has, Cinderella said. A twinge of panic riddled her nerves. Ma'am, I said I don't want to hear it. The Duchess sprang from her seat, gliding toward a ribbon box that Cinderella had brought to her chambers earlier. Open this, she ordered Cinderella. Carefully undoing the ribbon, Cinderella lifted the box's lid. Inside were 3 masks. The Duchess removed 2, holding them up. I had these made for the masquerade, but the shopkeeper was overzealous and sent me too many. I only need 1. Genevieve laid the masks side by side on the table. The green one was decorated with peacock feathers accented with violet and indigo gems, and the white one resembled a swan. Its feathers were opalescent with a band of black and velvet around the eyes. They're beautiful, Cinderella said admiringly. Take them. 1 for you and 1 for your friend. Cinderella drew a sharp breath, surprised by the Duchess's offer. I couldn't. Take them, Cindergirl. That's an order. Genevieve pushed the masks into her hands. If you're going to break the rules, do it properly and with style. Besides, they don't go with my gown. Cinderella brushed her fingers over the swan's mask's delicate feathers. Thank you, your highness. No need to thank me. Just make sure when you report to work tomorrow morning, you have your head out of the clouds. Off you go. My nephew will be here to escort me to the ball any moment now. At the mention of Prince Charles, Cinderella's heart skipped a beat. Part of her wanted to encounter him again, and part of her dreaded it more than anything. Yes, ma'am, she curtsied. I hope you have a grand time. The clock struck 8 as Cinderella hurried back to her room, where Louisa was already dressed for the ball, was waiting. You look beautiful, exclaimed Cinderella. Keep your voice down, whispered her friend, though she beamed at the compliment. Aunt Ermina is still upstairs. Then Louisa twirled, showing off her olive green gown and the gold trimming she'd added to its cuffs. Wait until you see yours. I've got something too. Look what the Duchess gave us. Cinderella opened the hat box and Louisa's eyes widened. They're exquisite, she breathed, picking up the swan mask. This will go wonderfully with your dress. Louisa stepped aside, lifting the pale pink gown draped over Cinderella's changing screen. Its fluted sleeves shimmered with tiny crystals overlaid upon the gossamer silk and the skirt. Dappled with gentle threads of silver, it seemed to dance off the candlelight against the wooden floor. How did you? One of my mother's customers ate too many oysters and fell ill, exclaimed Louisa with a mischievous glint in her eye. Won't hurt anyone if you borrow her dress for a few hours. I couldn't possibly. Yes, you could. Mama's already agreed to let you have it for the night. You're not allowed to refuse. Touched, Cinderella pressed the gown's soft silk to her chest. I guess in that case, hurry and put it on before Aunt Ermina gets back. Eager to comply, Cinderella slipped behind the changing screen. The gown was still warm from having been pressed, and the ruffles tickled her collarbone as she slipped it onto her body. I had a feeling to be just your size. Louisa surveyed Cinderella with an approving eye. But it's missing something. A shawl, maybe, or a necklace? A necklace. Cinderella opened her dresser drawer for her mother's beads. Will this do? Oh, that's very nice, said Louisa. The perfect finishing touch. While she clasped the beads around her neck, Cinderella glanced at herself in the mirror. The pink dress was elegant and understated, its shape slim and form-fitting, unlike the billowy skirts on the ball gown her fairy godmother had conjured for her. That suited her just fine. She wasn't going to the masquerade to catch the prince's eye. Or at least that's what I kept telling myself. The thought slipped into her mind before she could stop it. Cinderella took in a deep breath, trying to relax all the tension gathered in her shoulders. Her toes wriggled in her shoes. No glass slippers this time. Her shoes were made of leftover scraps of satin and, for good measure, she added a band over the ankles so they wouldn't fall off. Then again, she wasn't planning on having to dash off at midnight this time. A touch of wistfulness came over Cinderella as she and Louisa arrived in the ballroom. It was just as magnificent as she remembered. A crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling, reflecting brilliantly upon the marble floor, making it seem like she was walking among the stars. She scanned the room, searching first for the Grand Duke and then for her stepmother. No sign of Lady Tremaine and her daughters. With a sigh of relief, Cinderella adjusted her mask, the feathers tickling her cheeks as she tied it tight behind her hair. Are you sure no one will recognize us? She asked Louisa. I'm certain. Stop fretting. Cinderella fidgeted with her mask one last time and inhaled. There was no need to worry. They had taken a secret entrance into the ballroom, one used most frequently by the servants who served the king on his private balcony, so no one had seen them arrive. Not to mention the mask. There were so many people, all wearing masks, that even if her stepmother and stepsisters were present, chances were slim they'd recognize her. She swept her fingers against the marble balustrade, her shoes sinking into the plush carpet as she and Louisa descended one of the ballroom staircases. Last time, she'd been so caught up in the moment that she barely had time to absorb and admire her surroundings. How foolish I was, she thought. I didn't even know he was the prince. I didn't bother wondering why the orchestra started playing the moment we began to dance, or why there was no one else on the floor with us. She wouldn't be so foolish anymore. The orchestra had begun a waltz, the violins swelling into a lilting melody, but there was to be no dancing until the Duchess made her appearance. Why does everyone keep looking to the door? Cinderella asked, but she knew the answer as soon as the words left her. Everyone is waiting to see whether the lady with the glass slipper will show up tonight. The entire household is betting on it. What do you think? I have 50 silver rubles on it. Louisa's eyes glittered behind her mask. What about you? I don't think so. Come on, some of the girls are over by the buffet. Smart idea to get some nourishment before the dancing starts. Cinderella had started to follow Louisa when, out of the corner of her eye, she spied the Grand Duke perched on a private balcony beside a portly, elderly man, speaking in hushed tones as his companion observed the assembly with a pair of binoculars. Could that be the king, she wondered? Given the older man's uniform, pinned with so many medals it weighed down his shoulders, it had to be. She touched Louisa's shoulder. Why don't you go first? I want to explore a little. Shall I come with you? No, I won't be long. I just want to catch a glimpse of the king. Don't take too long. Louisa shot Cinderella a sly smile. Our kingdom's most eligible bachelor will make his appearance with his aunt soon. You won't want to miss that. Louisa spun away and missed the deep flush that colored Cinderella's cheeks at the mention of the prince. Composing herself, Cinderella pursued her mission of spying on the Grand Duke and returned to the secret door through which she and Louisa had entered. Located in one of the ballroom's many anterooms, it looked like an ordinary wall panel, marked only by an ivory knob in the center. Inside was a network of narrow tunnels that Cinderella didn't dare explore lest she got lost. After retracting her steps, she cracked open the door a hair, just in time to hear the Duke say, "If I may say so, Your Majesty, I saw the young prince with your sister. They were riding into the city yesterday morning, and since then, he hasn't been himself." "What are you trying to say?" The Duke took out his monocle and wiped it clean with his handkerchief. "As I've been trying to tell you, your sister's influence on the prince concerns me. Fortunately, I have invited the Princess of Lords to attend." "I do not want to hear this, Ferdinand. Just let me have my hour's worth of peace and quiet." "But you must listen, sire." The Duke lowered his voice, and Cinderella couldn't make out his next words. But the color suddenly drained from King George's face. Oh no, Cinderella swallowed hard. The Duke must have discovered what Genevieve had been trying to hide from him, that the king was planning to abdicate. Her heart hammering into her ears, she dared open the door a fraction wider. Her suspicion was verified by the king's next words. "Does Charles know?" "He will not have heard it from me." "Do you think he should know now?" "He should know?" A long, deliberate pause. "No." Before she could hear more of the conversation, the king disappeared behind a curtained partition, and from the top of the ballroom staircase, the royal crier announced, "The Duchess Genevieve d'Orléans, sister of His Royal Majesty King George Louis Philip, honored and beloved sovereign of Arules." Brass fanfares trumpeted across the chamber, startling Cinderella, who quickly exited the secret panel to join the rest of the guests in greeting the Duchess. The Duchess of Orléans had donned a black mask with silver whiskers, and she descended the staircase regally, fluttering a matching fan with feathers so long they nearly brushed against the carpet. At her side was Prince Charles, wearing a white mask that covered the upper half of his face. As the fanfare faded, the orchestra resumed its incidental music until the prince and duchess reached the dance floor. Then a slow triple beat emerged from the orchestra's lush harmonies. Cinderella watched the prince dance with his aunt, hiding a smile. The harsh angles that typically lined the duchess's mouth eased away, and Cinderella saw a trace of the cheerful, mischievous young duchess from the portrait gallery. Then as they danced, Genevieve whispered something in the prince's ear. Cinderella flinched, having a strong feeling the duchess was telling him to forget her. Tearing her gaze from the dance floor, Cinderella wove through the crowd to look for Louisa, but she didn't see her friend by the buffet. "Her relationship with the king was never a good one," murmured a lady blocking Cinderella's path, "but she was best friends with the queen. After Her Majesty passed away, she and King George had a terrible row, and that was the end of that." "I heard it had to do with her husband. He was one of those ruffian intellectuals. Even got himself in jail once, remember? The king had to create a new territory to knight him so it wouldn't be so disgraceful for Genevieve to marry beneath her. You'd think she would have been more grateful. Well, who knows what happened between them? It was all very hush-hush. Married to that traitor? I would be too. Maybe we'll find out now that she's back." The conversation flustered Cinderella. She didn't know what bothered her more, their spiteful words about the Duchess's past or the disdain that her husband had been a commoner. Both, she decided, finally spying a way around the noble women. Behind her, the prince's dance with his aunt came to an end, and polite applause rolled across the room. Then, as soon as it was considered tasteful, every eligible lady in the ballroom pushed her way forward, batting her fan to get the prince's attention. Cinderella backed into a corner so the waves of eager young women wouldn't trample her as they rushed forward. Jewels glittered, and a mix of rich perfume and desperation filled the air. Every lady parading past the prince was attractive in her own way, be it a lovely face or a stunning gown. If the prince was looking for a new bride, he had hundreds to choose from. Stop thinking about it. That's not your concern anymore. The problem was she didn't see Louisa anywhere. She had started toward the back where the buffet and the chocolate fountain awaited when she noticed the Grand Duke had detached himself from the king's side and was now speaking with a young woman wearing a tiara. Who was he speaking to? Before Cinderella could investigate further, 3 flamboyantly dressed women paraded across the ballroom. Though they wore masks, Cinderella would have recognized those auburn ringlets, those black curls, and that tight gray bun anywhere. But the familiar blue and green feathers, the blue-gray shroud, and the haughty, upturned noses only confirmed it. A tide of panic washed over her. It was Lady Tremaine and her daughters. Blood rushed to her head as Cinderella ducked behind one of the ballroom's towering flower arrangements. Only after the count of 3 did she dare glance back at her stepmother and stepsisters. Good, they hadn't seen her. Catching her breath, she edged along the table and searched the area for Louisa. I apologize, that was chapter 22 that I have started. She did say she'd be by the food, didn't she? Thought Cinderella, stepping back for a better view of the buffet. Her heel landed hard on someone's shoe, and she spun around, horrified as the stranger let out a quiet gasp of pain. "Oh, pardon me," she exclaimed. "I'm so sorry." The stranger's mask slipped off, and Cinderella's knees dipped instinctively into a crouch, her fingers reaching out to catch it before it fell. The string hooked over her thumb, and in triumph, she held out the mask to the stranger. "Here," she began. Her breath caught in her throat as she looked up. It was the prince. He had changed his clothing in an apparent attempt to go incognito, doffing the ivory jacket with gold epaulets for a simple blue coat with bronze buttons, but she would have recognized that face in any outfit. "Thank you kindly," said Charles, also half crouched. He started to rise to take the mask from her, but she was so startled to see him that she dropped it, and this time it fell to the ground. Her hand leapt to her mouth. "I'm sorry," she uttered quickly. "That was clumsy of me." Thankfully, the prince laughed. "I'll get it. It seems to have a mind of its own." Prince Charles picked up his mask and pressed it against his face, quickly tying the string behind his head. Then as he rose, he finally looked up into her eyes, and he let out a quiet gasp. "It's you." Her heart skipped a beat. What should she say? What should she do? Her legs were frozen in their spot, and if for not the table behind her, she was afraid she would have stumbled over her own 2 feet. "It's you," Prince Charles repeated in wonderment, his expression softening. He cleared his throat, a distinct rush of red coloring his ears as he realized he was staring at her. When he spoke again, his voice grew even gentler. "I thought I recognized your voice. I hoped I would see you again." Cinderella could have sworn the room was floating, and she with it. The glowing chandeliers swam around her, their lights blinking like stars. He hadn't forgot her. He recognized her, and moreover, he seemed happy to see her. Her lips parted. He was awaiting for her to respond, but what could she possibly say? How could she explain why she left the other night and why he hadn't been able to find her? He hasn't asked you for an explanation, she chided herself. "Hello," she said, hoping he wouldn't hear how her heart hammered. The simple greeting instantly made his face brighten, and she wondered whether he could have possibly worried the same, that she had forgotten him. "Hello," returned the prince. Before he could say more, a server appeared with a tray of fresh glasses. Charles gestured at it, and as he offered her a glass of water, his hand trembled slightly, the only sign that he was nervous as she was. "Were you thirsty?" Cinderella smiled shyly. "No, thank you. I was just looking for someone, a friend." "A friend?" "Yes. She came to the ball with me, but I think she might have made her way to the dance floor." Charles set the glass down. Let me accompany you there to find her, and selfishly steal a dance for myself if I may. Yes, she wanted to say. She desperately wanted to dance with him, to talk with him, to get to know him better, and yet the Duchess's words haunted her. I think he's in love with the idea of her. Well, the same could be said of Cinderella too, for what did she know of the prince? Nothing. After one kiss, you were imagining yourself his bride. It's a good thing the Grand Duke never asked you to try on the glass slipper. You would have fallen into a dream with a harsh awakening. No good could come of their meeting. She was a servant in the palace, he the only heir to the throne of Arules. Maybe she made an excuse to leave. She could run back to the servants' quarters and pretend this had never happened. Then, right as she gathered her resolve, a smile lifted Charles's warm brown eyes, and she melted. Cat caught your tongue, he prodded softly, or are you looking for the prince? His gentle teasing set her heart at ease. Your Highness, I apologize. I didn't. Don't bow and don't apologize. His words carried no trace of admonishment, only relief. You have no idea how glad I am you're here. Rather bashfully, he extended his arm for her to take. It seems for once the Grand Duke's done me a favor. What do you mean? Prince Charles gestured in the Grand Duke's direction. He's searching for you, Cinderella murmured, stating the obvious, still not understanding. He doesn't look happy. See that girl behind him? Cinderella craned her neck to look. Yes, the same young lady with the tiara she had noticed earlier. I was hiding in the corner of the ballroom trying to dodge Ferdinand's ploys to have me dance with her. If not for his scheming, I might have never seen you again. Cinderella's blush deepened. She stared at her hand resting comfortably on the prince's arm. It looks like they're waiting for you, she said quietly. And I've been waiting for you, replied Charles. He gestured at her mask. A swan. It suits you. I didn't have many choices. It was either a swan or a peacock. The prince leaned closer, speaking softly. Swans were my mother's favorite birds. She used to tell me that once they fall in love, they stay in love forever. A fanfare pierced the ballroom's din and Cinderella's thoughts, announcing the Princess Marie of Lourdes. A young man dressed like the crown prince of Arules bowed to greet the princess, and Cinderella whirled towards the prince, blinking back her confusion. But you're here, the prince laughed. Pierre was kind enough to exchange clothes with me for the night. I must say, having a loyal attendant who looks like me has come in quite handy. He gestured at the young man in the white mask, standing stiffly beside the king's throne as introductions were made. The princess was clearly waiting for him to ask her to dance, but Pierre stifled a yawn instead. He's doing too good of a job impersonating me, said Charles, amused. Dozens of ladies surrounded the fake prince, and even from the outskirts of the ballroom, Cinderella could hear them crying, Your Highness, do you remember me? Poor Pierre. I think he rather enjoys it, said Charles wryly. Anyway, I'll make it up to him. For now, let's take advantage of our disguises, shall we? Would you do me the honor of a dance? She touched her mask nervously. Hundreds of guests filled the ballroom, their faces blurred by candlelight. Cinderella scanned the crowd for her stepmother and stepsisters, but she couldn't find them. Stop worrying, she told herself. Enjoy the moment. You aren't still worried that you've forgotten how to dance, are you? Charles smiled. I know for a fact you haven't. Cinderella blushed, surprised he had remembered their conversation from the first ball. Still, the joke relaxed her, and she smiled back at him. No, I'm not. Then she took his arm, letting a whirlwind of excitement sweep over her as they began to dance. Was she imagining it, or had the music suddenly gotten more lush and romantic? The violins seemed to swoon with her every step, or maybe she was just simply happy. Happy to have found Charles again, to have the second chance with him. She wanted to get to know him. It had become apparent that she hardly knew anything about him other than what everyone knew about the prince. That every morning he rode his horse across the palace grounds, that he had been close to his mother, and that he did enjoy attending royal balls. But where to start? Their conversation now certainly wasn't stilted, but she was forcing herself to be polite and on her best behavior. Was it because he was the prince and now she couldn't help being more nervous and thus more ceremonious than before? What's on your mind? He sounded tentative, as if he were worried she'd run off again. She smiled shyly at him, becoming all too aware of how her heart skipped a beat when their eyes met. It was like they were meeting for the first time. The night could stretch as long as it needed to this time. Cinderella did not have to be back by midnight. She had no spell magic to worry about, and knowing her stepmother and stepsisters, they were too busy fawning over and following the impostor prince. And yet, there were hundreds of people in the ballroom. The music swam in her ears, the murmurs of other dancing couples buzzing. Over the prince's shoulder, she finally spied Louisa waving at her from the edge of the floor. Her friend had found her own dance partner, and she winked at Cinderella, mouthing, "Who is he?" Flustered, Cinderella pretended not to understand, and she turned to the prince. Could we walk through the gardens again?" she asked. "It was so lovely the first time." "I rather enjoyed the walk myself," said the prince. "It'll be good to get away from here. It's hard to talk over the music." Soon the ballroom glittered behind them, a silvery dome beyond the labyrinth of rose-studded bushes, leafy hedges, and marble fountains. A cool breeze tickled the back of Cinderella's neck, gently rattling her green beads. "My mother would really love it out here," she sighed. "Do you still help her tend her garden?" "No, she passed away years ago." "I lost mine at a young age too," said Charles. He removed his mask, slipping it into his coat pocket. "I remember," Cinderella said softly. Though everyone had loved the gentle queen, and no one more than the prince, their mothers had died in the same year, and Cinderella recalled wondering if everyone in the town was wearing black to mourn her mama. "My father used to tell me that my mother was in heaven with the queen. He had a feeling they'd become friends, and they would watch over each other. That helped a little, to think that she was in a good place." "Were you very lonely without your mother?" "Yes," Cinderella admitted. "We did everything together when she was alive. She'd take me out to the gardens to play on her swing. She could name every bird in the sky and paint them too. We were supposed to travel a rouleaus together and collect flowers from every city, then paint them once we returned home." She swallowed at the memory, one she had long forgotten until now. "Papa used to tease us for always being lost in our imaginations together. I still have a bad habit of falling into my daydreams." Before he could ask her more, she said, "Were you lonely?" "Yes, but you wouldn't have thought so if you'd been there. I was always surrounded by people. Tutors, advisors, everyone sought to shape how I thought because I'll be the future king. There was no one I could really talk to," Cinderella finished for him. Charles smiled. "Exactly. I understand, better than you know." Shadows flickered across the manicured bushes, and a chill swept over Cinderella. "What was that?" "I don't know." Creeping up towards the bushes, the prince surveyed the area. He grimaced. "The Grand Duke again, I'll wager. He must have talked to Pierre and gotten suspicious." He stood. "Let's get away from here." "Why don't I show you more of the grounds?" Cinderella nodded. "I'd like that." Little by little, her nervousness faded, and she laughed when the prince told her how he used to run into the garden when he was a little boy, chased after by his tutors. "I loathed my history lessons," he confessed. "All the tutors always trying to impress upon me that I was related to these great kings, all of them with the same names. Always a variation of George, Louise, Charles, and George again. At least it made my exams easier." The prince chuckled. "I must be boring you." "You're not," she assured him, "though history was my favorite." Her father had hired tutors for her, but soon after he had died, her stepmother had put an end to her education. Sometimes when she had to dust the library, she'd pore through the books on the shelves when no one was looking. Her stepmother had sold off the valuable ones long ago, but Lady Tremaine recognized that books looked impressive to the few guests they had to the house, so she kept them as decoration, at least until she caught Cinderella reading them. "My father traveled often when he was alive," Cinderella explained, "and he used to bring me curios from all over the world and tell me their histories. I loved it. Then maybe you'll appreciate this," Charles replied as he directed her through the endless maze of marble stairs and pruned hedges. They soon found themselves before a glorious fountain of angels, illuminated by a constellation of silver lanterns and surrounded by a coronet of swans with wreaths of ivy over their elegant necks. Water tinkled steadily from the sides like soft percussion against the wind's song. "This fountain was commissioned by my great-grandfather," said Prince Charles. "Arules had just ended a 20-year-long war with its neighbors, and he had this fountain made to celebrate peace, but also to remind us of the bitter cost of war." Cinderella brushed her fingertips against the water, its gentle ripples tickling her skin, like the fountain in the city center. "My father used to take me there when I was young." She folded her hands over her lap. "I haven't been back there in many years. I'll take you one day, though I have to confess, I don't get a chance to visit the center of the city much. It is not easy to go around without being recognized." "But you have Pierre," Cinderella joked. "Pierre can only fool so many. Unfortunately, he doesn't have much luck with my father or the Grand Duke." He gently guided her away from the fountain. "There's something else I want to show you." They walked through the gardens, the lilting music from the ballroom growing softer and farther away. Whenever he thought she wasn't looking, he stole a glimpse of her. His lips parted. "It's been a long time since I could talk to anyone this way," he confessed, "without feeling like I was different." "What about at the Royal University?" As soon as the questions left her lips, Cinderella blushed, realizing she revealed how much she'd asked about him. I heard that you'd been studying away from the palace for several years." A grin widened on Charles's face, his eyes brightening so much Cinderella swore they shone. He took a deep breath. "Even when I was a child, I never had many friends at school. All the boys were ordered not to offend me and to always agree with what I said. I used to beg my father to send me abroad and give me a different name, but he always refused. He didn't understand that I simply wanted to fit in. When I arrived at the university, I tried enrolling under a false name, but it was no use. I could have said my name was Peter the Pauper, and everyone would have still known who I was. I could have never set foot in the classroom or opened one of my textbooks and still have passed every course with honors." "So you made no friends?" "I had a few," he said, "but even then we weren't close." His gaze met hers, and there was such tenderness in his warm brown eyes that Cinderella wished time could stop so she could memorize the way he was looking at her. "I don't feel that way with you. I feel like I've been looking for you my entire life." His confession sang in Cinderella's ears, the intensity of his words arresting her in her place. "I know the feeling," she whispered. A chime punctuated the end of her words, and she instinctively looked up at the clock tower. It was midnight. She lurched, giving into a momentary flare of panic before remembering that the time didn't matter. She didn't have a magical curfew, no coach that would turn into a pumpkin, no horses that would turn back into mice, and no glittering ball gown that would turn into rags at the stroke of 12. She could stay out all night if she wished. Finally, they arrived at the end of the garden, and not far from the entrance of the palace, a glittering glass box atop a marble pedestal awaited. "This is what I wanted to show you," Charles said, unlocking the box and lifting her lost glass slipper. "I believe this belongs to you." Cinderella held the shoe close, treasuring it. "I wanted to bring the other slipper to the Duke when he was searching for me, but it shattered, and I worried I'd lost the only keepsake I had of the most wonderful night of my life in years. I thought I'd never see it again. I thought I'd never see you again. You'll never have to worry about finding me ever again, I promise." Charles gestured at the slipper, then at a nearby bench. "May I?" With a shy nod, Cinderella returned the slipper to him. A soft breeze swept past her mask, and she lifted it, letting the cool wind temper the heat in her cheeks. Neither of them had made a move toward the bench, and Cinderella, ignoring the sudden swoop in her stomach as she realized Charles was staring tenderly at her, sprang onto her toes and kissed his cheek. When she let him go, the prince rocked back on his heels dazedly, clutching the glass slipper against him as if he feared he'd drop it. "What was that for?" "A thank you," replied Cinderella. smiling at the confused but happy-looking prince. "For reminding me that not all miracles have to end at midnight. I'll explain." Charles drew her close, and her voice drifted. "I'll explain later." As he bent forward to kiss her, trees rustled and the click-clack of heeled shoes stomped nearby. Cinderella lifted her head, distracted by the sound. Voices in the near distance rose above the ripple of fountain water in strident tones. "There she is! Anastasia, Drusilla, follow me." Cinderella immediately lurched, untangling herself from Charles's embrace. Her vision reeled, the moon became watery, the hedges a haze of green. Panicking, she twisted away from the prince, but his fingers were laced with hers. So gently she could have pulled hers away, but she didn't just yet. "What is it?" he asked. "What's the matter?" What's the matter? The familiar words echoed inside her. It was the question he had asked before she fled from the last ball. She faltered, not knowing what to say, not knowing how to explain. Charles bent to retrieve her mask, which she must have dropped when he kissed her. He held it out to her in both hands. But when still she wavered, confusion knit itself in the prince's brows. Confusion and hurt. "Hurry, girls!" Lady Tremain's voice cut through the garden. Remorse burned in her throat. The thought of hurting him again tore at her, but she couldn't risk an encounter with her stepmother. She wanted to tell him who she was. She'd meant to, but she thought they'd have more time. Now she recognized her error, and it was too late. "I'm sorry, but I have to go." "Wait, please." Charles held out the mask to her. "I don't even know her name." "It's Your Highness." At the sound of her stepmother's shrill call, Cinderella panicked and drew away her hand from the prince. The mask slid from her fingers, falling into the pond beneath the bridge, and for the second time before he could stop her, she rushed down the stairs. Chapter 23. Her heart thundering in her ears, Cinderella dashed across the royal gardens, making for the servants' quarters. Even when Drusilla's and Anastasia's shouts had faded, she didn't stop. "Follow the clock tower north," Louisa had instructed her, "then make a left at the purple tulips." Cinderella trained her eyes up at the clock, its iron hands ticking minutes past midnight. By the time she reached the purple tulips, she was out of breath, her lungs tight with exhaustion. The entrance to Blooms and Looms was just ahead, the sentries she'd encountered when she first arrived still standing guard. "Look, it's the new girl. Trying to get back before Madame Ermina does her curfew check?" Yes," he chuckled. "You're a bit late for that, I think. Luckily, you're not the only one who sneaked out." Cinderella's eyes widened. "Did Louisa?" "Got off with a warning from Ermina hours ago. She's gone home already." Oh, relief swept over her. "Don't worry," said the guard kindly. "Ermina won't discharge you for going to the ball. If she did that, she'd have not a soul left working for her. But I would expect a stiff talking to in the morning." Cinderella offered him a faint smile. Shuffling into her room, she took off her borrowed dress and flung it over her chair. Then, burying her face in her hands, she collapsed into her bed. The moment she'd heard her stepsisters, her first instinct had been to run away. But should she have stayed? She could have explained things to him before dashing off, or at least told him her name. "It doesn't matter. It's best he doesn't find out who I am, a maid in his own home. And why not?" she countered herself. "Am I afraid he'd never want to see me again?" Cinderella shook her head, hardly able to believe that she was wrestling against her own feelings. "No, I'm not, because he isn't like that." She clenched her fists, remembering how he hadn't recognized her when she'd worn her palace uniform. A cord of bitterness knotted in her throat. Sooner or later he would find out who she was. For all she knew, her stepmothers had recognized her and told him already. Would Charles have her dismissed from the palace if he knew the truth? Would he ever want to see her again? Lady Tremain's words rang in her head over and over. An orphan and a servant. Who would want you? She gritted her teeth at the memory. Knowing her stepmother, she'd tell the prince that Cinderella was a thief and a liar, a troublemaker, who deserved to be sent away for good. No one's come for me, she reasoned, curling up against the wall tiredly. Her hands went up to her neck, clutching her mother's beads. They didn't see me, they only saw the prince. Uncertain what tomorrow would bring, she finally closed her eyes, drifting along the edges of her dreams until sleep finally claimed her. Get up, cried Madame Ermina, rapping on her door. Cinderella sprang up from her bed, the green beads rattling over her chest, and she quickly stuffed them into her pocket before greeting Louisa's aunt. Ermina scowled at her. Amelia has taken ill, so we need an extra serving girl at breakfast this morning. That means you, Cinderella. Cinderella's gaze flew up. Me? Serve the royal family breakfast? I couldn't. The Duchess is waiting for me. Well, you'll have to deal with 2 shifts, won't you? Ermina said, crossing her arms. And for not being in bed by curfew, I have a list of extra tasks for you after breakfast. Now hurry up and change. I expect you in the main hall in 5 minutes. 5 minutes later, harried footsteps pattered outside her door, followed by another knock. I'm the worst friend, Louisa cried. One of the valets last night told us Madame Ermina was about to do her curfew check, and I couldn't find you. Cinderella swallowed. This wasn't the time or place to tell her about the prince. Already her head was throbbing with panic over what she'd do when she had to serve him breakfast. I'll keep my head down, she said, inhaling. I'll hide behind the other girls if I have to. He won't see me. Cinderella, said Louisa, are you listening? It's all right, she assured her friend quickly. I can handle the extra work. Together they assembled in the main hall along with a dozen other girls who'd stolen out to the ball. One by one, Madame Ermina doled out their punishments. When at last she reached Cinderella, her mouth thinned into a tight, disappointed line. When I set rules, I expect them to be followed. That goes especially for new hires such as yourself. Here I was starting to think there might be some hope for you. Cinderella felt heat rush to her cheeks. The bells chimed for the serving maids to get to work, and Madame Ermina threw an apron at Amelia's orange sash at her, then pushed a tray into Cinderella's arms. Once you've finished serving breakfast, report here immediately for the rest of your extra tasks. The dress is in my room, whispered Cinderella to Louisa as she tied on the orange sash. I'll bring it to you after I'm finished with the breakfast service. Follow me. Madame Ermina grabbed her by the sleeve, dragging her towards the kitchen. She motioned at a large tray sitting on one of the shelves, heavy with jams, a porcelain teapot, teacups, pastries, and silverware, all meticulously arranged. Bring that into the royal hall, said Ermina, and for the love of God, don't drop it. Cinderella's more than up to that task, at least. Years of balancing trays, one in each hand for her stepsisters and one on her head for her stepmother, made short work of one platter. She picked it up easily and wove into the line of servants carrying breakfast into the royal dining hall. Keep your eyes down, she warned herself, but it was impossible to follow her own advice. The first thing she did when she entered the dining room was search for the prince. Her eyes picked him out easily. He sat to his father's right, his fingers clutching the thin handle of his teacup, though he wasn't drinking. Seeing him, her stomach flipped. She couldn't face him, not again, not so soon after the masquerade the night before. What would she tell him? How would she explain her running away for the second time? Worse yet, how would he react upon learning that she was a servant in the palace, in front of his father and the Grand Duke? Fighting the urge to duck behind a column, she fell slightly out of sync with the other servants processing into the hall. She hurried forward to catch up, and her mother's beads clattered in her pocket. She'd forgotten to leave them in her room. No chance of doing that now. It was too late. Besides, she had other things to worry about. Chin up, she reminded herself. Maybe he wouldn't recognize her in her uniform. After all, he hadn't the first time. Just serve the food quickly, then leave. The king sat at the head of the table. To his right was the prince, and to the left was the Grand Duke, tying a napkin around his neck in preparation for his meal. The Princess of Lords was most distraught, the Duke was saying. Most distraught indeed. She was an honest guest of Arule's, and imagine my mortification when I brought her to be introduced to the prince, only to find out it was his attendant. Charles, what have you got to say for yourself? said King George sternly. When the prince did not reply, Ferdinand threw his hands up in the air. Sire, this is a national embarrassment. It'll be the doom. She was there, interrupted Charles finally. She? The maiden with the glass slipper? Ferdinand raised an eyebrow. Well, why didn't you say so? Where is she now? Charles stared at his cup of tea. She got away again, didn't she? A rather peculiar young lady, I said so before. I'll say it again to remind you, Your Highness. A girl like that is unfit to be a princess. I won't have you slandering her, cut in the prince. You don't know her. No one knows her, Your Highness, returned the Duke smugly. So, Cinderella thought with a quiet breath, he isn't angry. He's still looking for me. The king was quiet during the exchange. As Cinderella approached them with their breakfast, he reached over to the fruit bowl for an orange. The Duke shifted the bowl closer to the king. Let me help you with that, sire. Oh, thank you. Charles frowned. You seem preoccupied, father. The king cleared his throat, but his voice still came out thick and hoarse. I'm starting to think Ferdinand might have a point. His expression became melancholy. The thick white eyebrows folding downward. I'm not going to be here forever, my boy. I want to see you happy before I go. Father, please, no more looking for this girl. This afternoon we'll meet to discuss your betrothal to the Princess of Lords. Cinderella swallowed and focused on setting the breadbasket on the table, along with the accompanying jars of strawberry jam and orange marmalade and dish of butter, all as quickly as she could. Her last task was to serve the tea, then she could finally leave. Keeping her head down, she leaned forward to fetch His Majesty's cup so she could refill it. As she bent, her green beads slipped out of her apron pocket and fell into the pot of tea on her tray with a resounding splash. Cinderella froze. An apology tumbled out of her mouth, but the words were incomprehensible even to her. As she regained her senses, she reached for a napkin to dry the king's setting, but Madame Ermina, coming out of nowhere, beat her to it. Ermina batted her away, deftly inserting herself to clean the mess Cinderella had made. Cinderella, she admonished, then went on. My deepest apologies, Your Majesty. The girl is new and rather clumsy. If the king replied, Cinderella couldn't hear it. She backed behind a marble column, hoping the prince was too busy listening to the Grand Duke's speech about the Princess of Lords, effervescent beauty and incomparable grace, to pay any attention to her. The seconds stretched, but before long, Madame Ermina had cleared the royal table and the entire incident appeared forgotten. What are you gaping at? Madame Ermina whispered harshly as she passed Cinderella on her way out of the dining room. Get back in the kitchen. The necklace. Cinderella didn't see it, or the king's teapot on Madame Ermina's tray. It was my mother's. You can get it later. Shoving Cinderella behind her, Ermina grumbled. Hurry now, you're making a scene. It's already bad enough that you've disrupted His Majesty's breakfast. Cinderella didn't hear the rest of what Louisa's aunt said. The entire time she told herself not to look at the prince. But in a moment of weakness on her way out, she glanced at him, to find him staring at her, his mouth agape. She darted her eyes away, rushing out. She could only guess what he was thinking. How she wished the earth would swallow her whole. She heaved a sigh of relief once she made it back to the kitchen. A silver platter with a steaming pot of tea and a slim vase of fresh orchids awaited her. The Duchess will take her breakfast in the chambers. Cinderella fetched the tray and hurried on her way. She had scarcely made it out of the kitchen when her eyes widened in shock. There he was, Prince Charles, asking one of the servants' girls where she was. She started to turn away, but the prince was too fast. He caught the edge of her sleeve and gently touched her arm. Stay, Cinderella. Please stay. You know my name? Madame Ermina spoke it when you dropped this. He lifted her mother's necklace into view, unwrapping it from an ivory napkin into my father's tea. A sheepish grin spread across his face. I was in such a rush to catch you, I didn't get a chance to clean it properly. It should be dry, but it might still smell like raspberries and lemons. this morning's to saying. He bowed slightly, taking her hand and pressing it to his lips. Cinderella. She blushed, drawing her hand away and retrieving her mother's necklace. The beads were still warm from the tea, and she flinched, remembering how astonished Charles had been to see her serving him and his father at breakfast. You should go back. They'll be missing you. What's the matter? I'm not a princess, Your Highness, she blurted, or a lady. I'm just the girl I've been waiting for my entire life, said Charles. First, please, don't call me Your Highness. But it's Charles, just Charles. Cinderella sucked in a breath. I mean Charles. Charles, the name settled on her tongue and Cinderella's cheeks warmed. How easy it was to call him by his name, and what a difference it made. Cinderella, he said, smiling, equal in step, equal in heart for always. That's beautiful. It was my parents' promise to each other, and now mine to you, if you'll have me. If you'll have me. Cinderella could hardly believe it. The prince was asking her to be his bride. His bride. She tried to find any trace of uncertainty in his eyes, but all she saw was warmth and sweet promise. It certainly did not look as though he were being forced to ask for her hand. Happiness bloomed inside her, warming her from head to toe. Being with him, that ache of loneliness she had suffered for so many years would ease away. She'd have a new family and a new home. Still, she hesitated. It was one thing to hope for someone who'd love her. For years she had closed herself off from the idea of a new family in order to protect herself. But now that the chance had come, Cinderella wrestled with it, with all of it. Marrying the prince meant she'd become a princess. She wouldn't just join any new family. It'd be the royal family. She spent so much of her life pretending, and her father's chateau, that she was content to be her stepmother's servant, that she could live the rest of her life there and be happy, simply dreaming and wishing. Even at the ball, she'd pretended to be someone she wasn't. Would she be pretending again if she married Charles? Pretending to be a princess? People wouldn't accept me as your bride, she whispered. They'll accept you if I tell them to. He took a deep breath. Trust me. I do, but... She lingered on her words, wondering how she'd tell him about her fairy godmother and how she had come to the first ball. Wondering how she could explain the confusion and uncertainty nodding inside her now. But I think I need some time. She took his hand, covering it with hers. It isn't a no, Charles, but I've only just left my home. There's so much I'm still learning. And there's someone, a friend who needs my help. Her voice drifted. She wanted to ask him about Lenore and whether he could help bring magic back to Arules, but she wasn't sure how to put it into words. I understand, said the prince. If she disappointed him, he hid it well. Take a few days. Take as much time as you need. In the meantime, I'll ask my aunt to release you from your duties. No, don't do that. He raised an eyebrow. I don't want your aunt to know just yet, she explained. I'll tell her when I'm ready. Besides, if I leave, Madame Ermina will have to send a new girl to attend her. Your aunt won't be pleased with that. Your aunt won't be pleased that she'll have to train yet another attendant and all the servants will have to draw straws. Then I will not speak to her. Charles looked down at their clasped hands. But while you're making up your mind about me, may I come find you? I want to get to know you better and you to know me. His eyes wavered, so hopeful Cinderella couldn't help hiding back a smile. All right, but what is it? He asked. The prince was close enough that she could see the stray crumbs of his breakfast still on his lips and a smudge of marmalade on the side of his mouth. Holding up the corner of her apron, she dabbed at his lips. It wouldn't do for a prince to return to breakfast with jam on his face, she said, wiping away the marmalade. The tips of her fingers accidentally brushed against the bend of his lips, and a shiver raced down her spine. She darted her fingers away, forgetting she was holding her apron. Its folds landed over Charles' chest, and she instinctively reached out to fix it. But as her hand hovered just over the prince's heart, so close she could feel his pulse beating unsteadily against her fingertips, she flattened her palm against his chest. And, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, she brought her mouth to his. It was a kiss even sweeter than their first, and Cinderella was glad she had set down her tray, for she surely would have dropped it this time. She stood on her toes, gently pushing Charles a hair's breadth. She stood on her toes, gently pushing Charles a hair's breadth away so she could whisper, "This isn't a dream, is it? You here with me, that we found each other? The sound of my heart in my ears would have woken me up by now if it were." Charles kissed her fingertips, holding them close to him. "I thought it was you. That time in the portrait gallery when I first saw you wearing Aunt Genevieve's sash. I should have known. I should have found you then." Cinderella held her breath. "You'll never have to worry about finding me ever again," she said softly, quoting him. "I promise." They kissed again. But in their exhilaration, she and the prince made one mistake. Neither of them saw the Grand Duke hiding in the opposite corner, taking in every word of their romantic interlude. I'm going to stop there, and next we'll be on chapter 24. So I hope you guys are enjoying this story so far. I thank each and every one of you that have tuned in to listen to the story, and you guys have a blessed morning, day, night, wherever you are, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.